Hello, CIS27. This is part 2 of the Unit 6 lecture video. And in this part, we will continue to talk about step in attack. So on page 2 toward page 3, here lists the different steps in attack. So the attacker would begin with using open source intelligence to identify the target, in that they would use social media and internet searches to find more about the target. Then they would craft email to phish for information, send email to the recipient from the server. Then once the user take the bait and click on the email, that will bring the user to the website that looked legitimate. Then the malicious link would trick the user to enter the credential. That credential would then be forwarded to the attacker, so that way the attacker can access the targeted system. Then the attacker would install malware on the targeted system or a backdoor. Then the malware would examine the data of the activity, or they can return to that system using the backdoor. Then the malware would gather the data, typically divide it into encrypted chunks, and forward that back to the attacker. Data exfiltrates out to the network from the network and then back to the attacker. That data can be exchanged or sold, or being used for leverage. So in the assignments, it asks for what type of anti-malware you should be implementing to protect your system. So what you need is you need to install anti-malware, which is security application that could be host-based. There are two types of anti-malware. One would include signature-based detection, and this looks at signature of the file and data definitions that's defining the pattern of the malware. And in order to quarantine the malware, it needs to take a look at the signature. If it seems harmful to the system, then it would quarantine the infected file. The heuristic-based detection, it detects malware based on previously known activity, and it does not require a signature. So this is used for zero-day exploit. It's designed to protect live environment from sandboxing codes. It detects viral activities as well. And all anti-malware check file integrity. It checks to see if the system consists of modified files. It can check against the hashes of the system file depending on the baseline, and it calculates the hash periodically. Now, when we use data execution prevention, which is DEP, this is a feature that prevents codes from executing in the memory region, in which that it's marked non-executable. This would prevent the code from executing in the non-executing memory region. Now, depending on the type of anti-malware that you're using, not all anti-malware would include DEP, and not all anti-malware would be heuristic-based detection. So in a network environment, we want to use heuristic-based and signature-based detection. Most of the time, the client system would have signature-based detection, where the server would have heuristic-based detection. So having anti-malware is a form of protection, but it doesn't give you a complete 100% protection. Now in the next part, it talks about how you can protect your system from malware in the notes on page 3. So most security software anti-malware, you would be able to you can set for scans. You can check for updates where it would update the definition. But for the protection overall from email to our files, for our email, we wanted to make sure that we set spam filter. We can set the rules in the mailbox for the protection, and from the network standpoint, this can be done on the Exchange server. Using anti-malware and mail gateways to really detect the incoming mail and the outgoing mail with attachments or possible embedded malicious code. You can also set boundary and rules for firewall. And based on those rules, it can block specific type of system behavior. So the anti-malware type and DEP can also be found on page 3 of your notes. Advanced malware tool. This is a combine of multiple technology to protect the network. We can use this to detect attacks along with responding to the attack. Now, most importantly, we can educate the users. So by regulations, for fulfilling compliance, user training needs to be done once a year. Security awareness needs to be done at least once a year. So awareness and training program needs to be completed periodically. You need to provide information about new malware, different form of attacks, phishing tactics, zero-day exploit, social engineering tactics. So the updates of this will allow the user to understand what they could be facing. But when you're using anti-malware, you also need to make sure that your anti-malware is up to date. The last part of the notes talks about why social engineering works. And earlier we talked about social engineering includes human trickery. So in social engineering, they would use one or more psychological based principle, and this increased the effectiveness of the attack that they use. So authority is one of the principal. Compliance to configure the authority in the process. And this is effective for impersonation, for whaling, for vishing attack. Intimidation is another tactic, and this is a form of bullying attack. This is effective for vishing attack or gaining physical access. Consensus is a form of influencing the users by other. Scarcity is to take advantage of showing limited resources. So it would encourage the user to perform certain action in limited amount of time. Urgency, this requires the user to have immediate response. So it encourages the user to have immediate response in clicking a button, opening a file, accessing a certain type of system. Incorporating familiarity is to build comfort and encourage the user to commit certain action. So if the user is comfortable or familiar with certain applications, certain tools, that would encourage the user to commit a certain action that they're familiar with. And ultimately, social engineering is built around trust. which is building the relationship to encourage certain actions. So that could be done over time. It could be done by impersonation. It could be done by consensus, by scarcity, authority, urgency, or familiarity. And so going back to our assignments, it asks for the principle that enhance social engineering, and you can include these: authority, consensus, scarcity, urgency, familiarity, and trust. And you can also find this information on the last page of our notes. And this includes my part 2 of Unit 6 lecture. Please look at the next video, which is the lab video in which I go over Kali Linux and different forms of attack. Thank you for watching.